computer. Love that. Thank you so much for the reminder. 12 thumbs up.
Hey, Rabbi,
Yeah.
do you have any other post-it notes on your computer?
Oh, no, I've got whiteout all over my screen, though. I can't seem to wipe it away, but okay. Any case, so it says his son Shimon, the son of Rabban Gamliel, would say. So this is his teaching. As a rabbi of a synagogue, three synagogues during my tenure of 25 years in the rabbinate in America, I found this teaching to be very, very wise. Here's what he says. His son Shimon would say, all my life, it says here in Hebrew, kol yamai yom, all the days of my life. This was not written by MacDonald Carey from the Days of Our Lives. Anybody ever see that soap opera? Like sands through the glass, so are the days of my life. Okay. All my life, gadalti bein chachamim. He says, I've been raised or grown up amongst wise people. So you can imagine in his house, his father was the great Rabbi Gamliel. It wasn't your average visitor that came to the house. He must have been all kinds of great sages and wise men, etc. He said, all the time that I was raised among the wise scholars, he says, Lo matzati laguf. I haven't found anything better for the body. For the body, tov, better than shtika. Shtika is quiet or to be silent. It's a very interesting thing. All my life, I've been raised amongst wise people, great scholars. And one of the things that I found nothing better for the body is to be silent. How do you like that? So before I give you my commentary and the commentary of other commentaries, anybody have any reaction to that? Like what is he saying, or do you have an interpretation that might be worthwhile to hear about why silence is so critical? And he says it's critical to the body. I would have thought maybe critical to the soul, critical to the way you behave or whatever, but he says it's something very, very uh, good and nothing better for the body than to be quiet. So any initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, Rabbi, my first reaction is that,
Okay,
it takes quiet to reflect on the wisdom that he's heard and has been around, right? So
beautiful.
if he was raised in that and hearing that all the time, you need the silence to be able to reflect upon what you're learning.
Beautiful. Very nice. Interestingly enough, if you look in a Torah scroll, or if you look in a Hebrew English Torah, the five books of Moses, you will often find spaces actually in the Torah scroll itself. Sentences don't always go zoom, 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 zoom. Often you will find spaces in between words or in between sentences. Sometimes the spaces will be just 9 letters worth of a space. Sometimes it'll be a lot longer. And our great rabbis decipher the purpose of the spaces is that they usually happen after God communicates something very, very deep or very, very consequential to Moses. Not that there's something unconsequential that God would convey to Moses, but that space indicates a time where God, in his transmission to Moses to write down what I'm going to tell you now, so that we can have a permanent record called the Five Books of Moses, uh, pause here because this needs a lot of thought and it needs a lot of depth and it needs a lot of quiet. So that's why. And in the printed edition of the Hebrew Torah, in an actual volume, you will sometimes see the letter Pei is there or the letter Samech. And that indicates, again, times when God said to Moses, we're going to pause here so that you can really consider the depth of what I'm saying in order that you can teach the depth of what I'm saying. So I think you're right. You need quiet for contemplation, to consider something a lot more deeply, a lot more consequentially. to see where that fits in your life. Does it, doesn't it? May not fit now, but I can see down the road where this teaching would be very helpful to me, etc. So I appreciate that comment. Anybody else have a thought before I convey what some of our commentators said?
I do have a thought.
Okay.
When hear that or read that, it reminds me of somebody who's talking all the time. They're not listening.
Ah,
So it takes, a conversation's two ways, right? So if you're not listening and you're always talking, 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 then it turns into a big problem, right?
you're absolutely right. That's another great observation. There are some people who are not only talkative, but I would say overly talkative. There's some people who in a group can overtake the conversation very quickly, grab it by the reins, and hardly ever let go. And I think in a general sense, you're right. People who overtalk under listen.
And we see that a lot, Rabbi, in like midrash settings or like a bait midrash, where
Yes,
like let's just say, we're talking, and you just said it. Sometimes I just sit and listen to what is being said, you
yes.
know, to be able to pull on to the weightiness of it. But there are some times where, like you just said, there's somebody that would control or dominate the whole midrash, and it can be sometimes frustrating. So
Yeah, I agree with
yeah.
you. Yeah, it's like too much. It's like somebody who overtalks doesn't have those pauses, you know? They clearly mean to convey something and probably something important because that's why they're talking a lot in general, but they don't give us time to absorb some of the important things they're saying because they're over talking the important parts and they can't can't seem to stop. There are people like that. So yeah, you're
Uh,
right. You're right.
one more question I had was in when we read the Psalms and we see the word Selah, doesn't that mean to pause as well?
I'm not sure. It's a great question. I'm not sure. The idea that most sang to me when I saw an interpretation of that word Selah, is it indicated that it's the musical conductor's word to indicate something for the choir.
Okay.
In other words, in the days of the Holy Temple, I think it's certainly happened in the days of the first temple, which was up for about 410 years or so. I don't know if it happened also in the second temple, I'm not sure. But certainly in the first temple, the Levites, the Leviim, the Levites would stand on various steps, and they were the choir. They would sing songs of praise. Um, they could be singing psalms that King David wrote. And maybe that word Selah is a conductor's term
Okay.
for them to do. I'm not sure, but it's more his term than something we need to be concerned about.
Got it.
But that's that was the best of what I've heard about
That
that
makes
term
sense. Yeah. I'd heard that it meant pause, but that makes sense that it's for the conductor, not
for the
for us
conductor, right?
necessarily.
Yes. Yes. Bob, what were you going to say?
Just a question. When you slika, is that the word you said?
Selah.
Shtika. You
Oh,
mean taken from,
stika,
yeah,
to be
shtika.
quiet.
Yeah. It's a
I thought
Hebrew word, actually. When you want to
I
say
thought
to
you said
somebody to be quiet, you say, slicha, excuse me, shtok, which means,
okay. Well, I was going to ask you if slika is like if you said excuse me or pardon me.
oh, so that's a whole other word.
You thought he said sleep.
You didn't say slika. You said what?
Shtika. But you're right.
Okay.
Slicha is excuse me, pardon me.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. I
yeah,
thought that's what you said was slika.
no. So this is
Okay.
shtika. That
Okay.
word will come up in another teaching. Yeah. So I appreciated all of the various interpretations that you've mentioned. Um, and what we find is that there's a lot to be gained from hearing rather than speaking. And I remember years ago I read there was an interview done about William Raspberry. I don't know, he was a a writer for the New York Times. I don't know anything about what did he write about. Was he with us? Again, I have no idea. I just remember this piece of the interview where he was interviewed by eighth graders as if they read the New York Times. I don't know how they were introduced. He was introduced to the eighth graders. Were they awed or, oh, here's another speaker? Couldn't tell you. But I remember one of the students in the eighth grade to whom William Raspberry was speaking, one of them said, "Do you ever read opinions with which you disagree?" Like most of us tend to live in an echo chamber. We gravitate towards the editorials and comments that are somewhere in the sphere of our agreement. Could be a little off here and there, but generally we agree. So many of us live in that kind of an echo chamber. So one of the students says, do you ever read opinions of people that you totally disagree with? And he goes, absolutely. And the child says, why? Why would you do that if you know you're going to disagree? And his answer to them was, because now I know two things. Now I know what I think, and I also know what they think. So I have doubled my knowledge. Let's say the other person is writing knowledgeably about something and they have an opinion, a knowledgeable opinion. But he said, basically, I expand my knowledge by hearing or reading something with which I disagree. So all aspects of listening, all aspects of just being quiet and listening to the people around you, or shtika can also mean what's great for the body. Get out of the hustle and bustle of Route 95 or whatever goes cross country and go sit next to a quiet river. Go sit in a field. Go sit in an orchard. Psalm 23. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. One commentary says, you know why he does that? Because we tend not to do it ourselves. Why does he need to lead us to still waters? Because we tend in our busy lives not to go to the still waters. So, yeah, shtika is not just amongst a group of people, but maybe that's why he says, I found nothing better for the body than quiet, which could mean to immerse yourself in not in the middle of Times Square, but to immerse yourself in a very quiet place. It could be in your living room between 3 and 5 a.m., where probably nobody else is, or out near a babbling brook. But if they're babbling, they're going against this teaching because they should be quieter than just babbling. Anyway, why did this teaching touch me as a rabbi of a synagogue? Because one of the places where I worked with a 1,300 family congregation, it was very big. I was the associate rabbi. The head rabbi taught me something very important. So we used to go to board meetings, BOARD, which sometimes were BORED, as you can imagine, board meetings. And as the new rabbi, I thought I was expected to comment on everything, even before they say, so Rabbi Adler, how do you feel about our new budget? So I would feel that I've got to say something about everything that's being mentioned. And I saw the head rabbi was very quiet and intermittently made a comment about this or that, asked a question, gave his thoughts, and then he was quiet the rest of the time. And after that kind of initial meeting, I said, whoa, you were very, very quiet. I thought you would be more talkative or loquacious. And he said, why? So I don't know. So you'd be noticed. So people would know you're in the room. That's why. And he said, do you think there's anybody in that room that didn't know I was in the room as the head rabbi? I said, probably everybody knew. So he goes, oh. So what more do I need to do? In areas during the meeting where I felt very strong about something, I would say something. Otherwise, he said, I've had meetings where I've said nothing. And nobody came over to me and said, Rabbi, you said nothing. They know if I have something to say, I'll say it. And if I don't, I'll be remaining quiet. So I thought that was a great lesson. And I learned a lot from that lesson to carry me through the rest of my years in the American rabbinate before we made Aliyah. So, a little anecdote, a grandson is watching his grandfather. So in Yiddish, grandfather is the word Zaidi, having nothing to do with being how old you are. Oh, he's 80. He's not 80, he's Zaidi. It's a Yiddish word meaning grandfather. He's watching his grandfather prepare for the Rosh Hashanah big speech. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the Jewish community, the biggest crowds. Biggest crowds. So I was in a congregation of 1,300 families as an associate rabbi. How big was the crowd on the high holidays? 5,000 people. Now, those that go to like a mega church, that sounds like a yawn. 5,000. But in a Jewish community, to be sitting in front of, they weren't all in the same location, but to be sitting in front of 2,000 or 2,500 or 3,000 people at the same time, that only happens on Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. That's it. Thank God they don't show up in these humongous numbers the rest of the year, because you'd have to prepare better sermons and everything else, because look who's here today. Wow. In any case, a grandson is watching his Zaidi prepare his remarks for the first day of Rosh Hashanah. And he sees that Zaidi is working very, very hard. He's writing, he's crumpling a piece of paper, tossing in the trash can, working hard, working hard. He's just watching and observing. And he says to Zaidi, Zaidi, why are you working so hard? You've given these kinds of speeches before in front of the large crowds that come for Rosh Hashanah. Why are you working so hard at writing this sermon? Don't you know what to say already? Good question. And Zaidi says to him, oh, every year I know what to say. It's harder to know what not to say. Yeah. As a rabbi in a synagogue for 25 years, it's harder to know what not to say. And that anecdote strikes me because that's pretty much what the teaching is saying. Sometimes there's nothing better than either being quiet altogether or being in a peaceful, quiet place, or knowing when to say, knowing when not to say, knowing what to say, what not to say, knowing when to hold them, knowing when to fold them. All of that is encapsulated in this initial teaching of number 17. So before we move to the rest of number 17, any thoughts, questions, comments, reactions? Okay, if you do, let me know. So now he continues. He says, I've found nothing better for the body than silence. And then he says, the essential thing is not study, but deed. The essential thing is not study, but deed. And then he says at the end, and one who speaks excessively brings on sin. One who talks too much doesn't just mean filling the airways, blah, 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 blah. But there's a certain point where you may have noticed this yourself in your life. There's a certain point where you're talking about things or you're talking about people, and it's all nice and good, and we're not in a danger zone anywhere in our conversation. And all of a sudden, you feel like you just said something that here's the line, and you just crossed it, and you say, "Oh, I wish I could take that back." Could have been the way you judged somebody that everybody's talking about, or you said something that wasn't exactly the nicest thing, but you thought it was a pebble and it landed like a boulder in people's ears. So that's his the final teaching in number 17. One who speaks excessively brings on sin. When you talk too much, sometimes loose lips.
Sink shit.
They certainly do. They certainly do. So let's take a look at his teaching. He is saying that study is very important, because if you don't study, you don't know how to do what you need to do, no matter what faith community you're in. Your faith texts tell you how to do what you need to do, to feel connected, etc. He's saying that study is very important, but perhaps even more important than that is action, deeds. When your study leads you to act, that is a very good coupling of your study and action. Study that leads to action, to doing noble things because of what you studied, is exactly what he's talking about. So he's also saying, without actually saying it, that deeds are not just intentions. Oh, I meant to do that. Okay, great. You were meant to do that. Standing O, wonderful. Did it kick over into actually doing it? Not exactly. So that's where deed comes in. Intention is very good. I believe personally God does not ignore intention. I think he understands it. Would he be happier if you kick the intention over into deed, something constructive to actually do? I think so. But this is not to downplay intention, because I think intention is very, very important, and it often leads as a motivator to action. So study informs us what the proper action should be. I mentioned in one of our earlier sessions that there was a philanthropist who gave money to Yeshiva University to have scholarly individuals study more intensively and get paid for it, but he said he would only do that if they promised to teach. So study in order to teach, he would subsidize the whole program. If they're just going to study for themselves and not share it, he wasn't interested. Anyway, that's the way they did it. And it turned around the entire Yeshiva University and how they did things. And students went out to the nearby communities of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut even, and they taught others. So that's exactly what he was looking for. So you can know piano theory, but if you never take it to the actual piano, okay, theory's nice, but it's good to actually play it and practice it. You have great chef techniques, but if you never use them, okay, you got the techniques, but where did you mix? Where did you bake? Where did you prove that all that you've learned has any sense of importance? You probably know that if you ever go to a conference or any kind of a symposium, a convention, whatever, what do the people tend to say in the wrap-up? Right? You're there for a day or two, all kinds of sessions and keynotes, plenaries and whatever, and usually somebody summarizes it at the very end of the entire gathering. So I've been to many, and one of the phrases I hear most often is, "So many of you will say, what do we now take back to our fill in the blank, to our community? What do we now take back? We're a group of rabbis. We're a convention for 2 days. What do we now take back to our synagogues? What do we now take back to our congregations? What do we now take back to the organization that we all represent? What do you now take back to the to your branch, to your branch? What does that mean? This was all very good in theory, but unless you take away something actionable, was nice. Meals were good. Entertainment was great. Speakers were fabulous. But if you don't have anything to take with you, one might ask the question, what was the value of the gathering? And so they say, what do we take home? What do we take home? What, you want to take home theory? No, we want to take home, how do we put all this into practice? Yeah, and I think that's exactly what Shimon, the son of Rabbi Gamliel, is exactly talking about. And then he says, one who talks too much brings on sin. Yeah, talking too much sometimes can lead to gossip, because the more people talk, the friendlier the group is, and now boundaries are lowered. And before you know it, it's anything goes, and everybody can say whatever they like. Things can get into insult, gossip, slander, sometimes even vulgarity, a certain silliness. And before you know it, people start to say stuff that they really should not have said. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that. whether
Yes.
yes, it happens. Unfortunately, and the friendlier it becomes, the more like I say, the boundaries are relaxed, and before you know it, you have not the greatest gathering, doing not the greatest things. So, what can I? By the way, a lot of people say if things get too friendly and you're starting to talk about people and you want to criticize a certain person that everybody knows, there's a phrase that is often said, and the person would say, "Oh, I would tell this to his face." Do you ever hear that? Oh, I would tell this to his face. Cursed be the one to actually say, "Have you ever?" Because the chances are that they've never, in my experience. But oh, I would tell them to their face. It's not like I'm just telling you people. I would tell it to them straight. But most often that doesn't happen. So yeah. Anyway, so that's a capsule of the teaching of Shimon, the son of Rabbi Gamliel. And before we move on to teaching number 1 of chapter 2, any thoughts, observations, reactions, comments about any of this that we've learned for the last few minutes? Okay. So now you can you might have already done this. You can click on what I sent yesterday to chapter 2, and it'll show you the 1, and it'll say the following. Excuse me. It'll say the following. Rabbi Omer. Rabbi says. Now, who is Rabbi? Rabbi is often called Rebbe, also Rebbe, not like the Lubavitcher Rebbe that died 30 some odd years ago, not like a Hasidic Rebbe that you may have an image of. Rebbe was the one who edited the entire body of what we call the Mishnah. Major figure in Jewish history, Jewish law, etc. Again, he edited the entire body of oral law, and he taught the following. He says, what is the right path for a person to choose? What is the right path? So very often we have to make a decision about what to do. One decision we may have to make is, I'll tell you, this happens to me a lot. Every day I get a lot of emails, solicited or not, excuse me. And in those unsolicited emails, there's a lot of pleas for its charity. Unfortunately, in Israel, there is no lack of organizations that are trying to help out victims of terror, their families, families of people in battle who leave their wives and their kids at home and they're out for extended periods of time. It could be families of terror, whatever it is, there is no shortage. And each of these emails ask for some help for these families. So I have to make a decision. Do I want to send? Because today I've gotten 10 of these. How do I decide which of the 10, if any of the 10, I'm going to help out? I should help out one of them, but maybe they're asking for large sums of money, and what's my 20 shekels going to do? Okay, we can debate that. But I have to ask myself the question that when it comes to giving charity, if I give too much, that's way out of my league, I may eventually end up needing charity. So if you're very generous, you could end up being in need of charity yourself. However, if you give too little, then what kind of a person are you? If you remember the teaching from, pardon me, let me take a little coffee. If you remember the teaching from last week, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? But if I'm only for me, what kind of a person am I? And if not now, when? So if I give too little, that's very nice, but it doesn't really help the others. So if I give too much, it helps others, but it jeopardizes my economic welfare. And if I give too little, that's good for me, but it doesn't really help others. So So Rabbi Yehuda is asking, how do you balance decisions that you have to make in all areas, not just charitable donations, etc. So he has a formula. He has a formula of how you make this balance. And he says, here's how you make the balance. Whatever you want to do, your next task, right? And we just learned from the son of Rabbi Gamliel that action is more important than the study of it. The study ought to lead to action. So here is what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. How do you choose which decision to make? How to go? The path that is honorable and beneficial for the person and also beneficial for other people. Now you may say, wow, did that did that take a scholar to say that? I mean, what really is it saying? Choose the path that's beneficial for you and also beneficial for others. I don't think you need a scholar to say that, but you need a scholar to know how to do that. That's not easy already. And again, it's a matter of balance. How do you balance that? Well, okay, what's good for it should be good for you and it should be good for others. So how do you do that? So one commentary comes and says, where it says you ought to do what is beneficial for you, the word leoseha, what is beneficial for you and what is beneficial for others, you've got to weigh the midpoint of that, what's beneficial for you and beneficial for others. The word leoseha for you can also mean what is beneficial or praiseworthy by your maker. Who is your maker? God. So now you have another element to put in there. How do you make your choice of your next move, your next word, etc.? Consider what looks good to your maker and what looks good and does good for the others. So that already puts a little different spin on it. To wonder, is what I'm going to do or what I'm going to say next something that God is going to be pleased with? Will Hashem be happy with that or not so happy with that? If I think he will be happy with that, will the people that I need to benefit, whatever, will they be happy with the choice I've made? So again, he gives kind of a formula, but it's up to the individual to do their own weighing of, will God be happy with it? Will people be happy with it? Will I be happy with the decision? And you have to take all of that into account and find where's that needle in the midpoint. How do you balance all that and find the midpoint of exactly what you'd like to do or say next? So this is where they come up with Maimonides' golden rule.
Mhm.
What is the golden rule? He who has the gold makes the rules. That's one form of the golden rule. Some people, I listen. Maimonides has 14 volumes of Jewish laws in all areas. I can't say that I've read through the entire book of Maimonides, but those who have read it and studied it say Maimonides never mentions this golden rule. Does anybody know what the golden rule is?
Is it do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or something similar to that? Do unto others as you want it done to you.
Interesting. I'm not sure that's the golden rule. And now that I've asked you the question, I'm asking myself, do I know specifically what the golden rule is? And I don't know that I can identify it. But if anybody wants to take a moment on your phone or whatever to check what is the golden rule, we'll all benefit from that. But Robert, what you just mentioned was something that we learned recently
Yes,
about somebody who went and said, I will convert to Judaism if you teach me the entire Torah while I stand
yes.
on one foot. And Hillel said to him, what is distasteful to you, don't do to other people. So, what does the golden mean? I don't know that I can state it crisply, But it's the idea of finding that midpoint between going underboard and going overboard. I'm sure it's stated a lot better than that, but the idea is moderation. Things in moderation are preferable, unless a situation calls for extreme generosity. Extreme generosity. I think it was 1991, either Iraq or Iran was sending missiles towards Israel. I think it was Iraq, but I can be corrected. 39 missiles towards Israel. There was a fear that some of them were chemical warheads. And they started this late in the afternoon of, I think it was January 19th, 1991. This is a long time ago. The Jewish community in Baltimore joined in our synagogue, because it had all those seats, joined in our synagogue at the time to pray for the safety of Israel, the security of Israel, etc., and to raise money for Israel for its defense systems. And that evening, the place was packed with, I think, 1,000 people. They called it for midnight. Midnight, 1,000 people. And somebody was an effective fundraiser and said how much money is needed for effective defense of whatever's going on, etc. They raised hordes of money. I remember because I pledged something that I must have been stoned to pledge that amount. But okay, sometimes you feel like you want to really, go beyond. But in general, moderation is what is being preferred. So Rabbi Yehuda says, whatever your extremes are in a certain time where you have to make a decision, try to find the moderate point of that, and also try to imagine what does your maker, what would he like you to do? So I think
Rabbi?
this, go ahead.
Sorry, just quick statement. So similar to what Robert was saying, I found that Hillel had actually stated it in the negative form,
Yes,
which is what is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow.
yes, you're right. And there are many commentaries ask, why did he put that in the negative form? Why did he put that in the negative form? I can't say that I recall too much about it, but that is a question that the scholars debate. One thought that I remember being memorable on that is that to state it in a negative way, it kind of it gives it a boundary that may be more clear than the positive way of saying it. And maybe sometimes people react better when they know what not to do as opposed to what to do. I give you an example. You go to a zoo, just paid your money, you get a ticket, you go in. What's usually the first thing that greets you is a board, right? Do not feed the animals. Do not put your arm in the cage. Do not throw trash. Do not do that. Do not toss the popcorn. Do not do this. There's a list of 14 or 15. Don't do these things. Now, okay, but what's the last line? Have a nice day. So you ask yourself, how can I have a nice day if I can't do any of these things? And the answer is you will have a nice day if people don't do any of these things. Then you'll have a nice day. If you're standing next to somebody near the lion cage and they extend their arm into it, and God forbid the person gets bitten, that's going to ruin your day. Or whatever. Or if you're stepping all over popcorn and candy wrappers and half-tossed ice cream cones, that's going to ruin your day. So sometimes you can enjoy more when you're told what not to do than if you are told what to do. So maybe it
There's
has
freedom within having parameters.
Right. Yeah. Freedom within boundaries.
Yeah.
So to me, that already says something, in terms of Hillel, why did he put in the negative? Sometimes it's better to know the things that you shouldn't do, and then it's free and open about doing the things that you think ought to be done. So, so this is Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, he was not only the head of the Jewish community, but was also the codifier of the Mishnah. He also says the following. He says, look at three things. This jumps a little bit in teaching number 1 of chapter 2. He says, look at three things. Histakel bishlosha divarim. Look, observe, and almost meditate on three things. And if you meditate on these three things and you give these three things time to meditate and sink in, he says, Ein ata ba lidei avera. You will not come to sin. If you will think of the following three things, you will likely not come to sin. My little commentary on that is you won't come to sin as quickly as if you did not consider the following three things. Okay, everybody's imperfect. Nobody is perfect from my point of view, and God does not expect perfection. But he would like us to follow the prescription as closely as possible, whatever it is in the faith community. So Rabbi Yehuda says, if you look upon these three things, you will not come to sin. You will not come to the hands of sin. Okay? What are these three things? He says, know what is above you, or who is above you. But here the word ma literally means know what is above you. Now, what is above you? That's only one thing. He takes that idea of know what is above you and he breaks that into three parts. That's why he says these three things and you won't come to sin. What are the three things? What should you know about that which is above you? There is an ayin ro'ah. There's an eye that sees. There's an ozen shoma'at. There's an ear that hears. V'chol ma'asecha, and all your deeds, basefer nichtavim. All of your deeds and all of your actions are written in a book. Ooh, wow. So basically he's saying, if you consider the facets of the one above you, there are many facets to God, no question about that. If you consider these three facets of the one above you, there's an ear that hears, there's an eye that sees, and there is a book into which every action that you do, every word, every deed is written in a book. So we'll say more about that for sure. You should just know that here we are as a Jewish community on the cusp of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. It's not only a time of newness, refreshing, etc., trying to think of ways that we can get closer to God and his prescription in the Torah, faith communities, whatever their faith texts indicate at this time. So there is a sage in the Talmud that says that God has three books open in front of him at this time of Rosh Hashanah. He has three books in front of him. One book is the book of those who are totally righteous. A second book is the book of those who are totally wicked. And the third book is the book of those who are somewhere in between. And this rabbi in the Talmud teaches those who are totally righteous will right away get written into the book of life. The book of life is a very, very potent imagery within the Jewish community to be written and described in the book of life. Those who are totally wicked don't have much of a chance of repentance, and they will be written in the book of whatever you want to call the opposite of life. Does that mean actual death? Does that mean a lousy life from here on in? Whatever, however you interpret it. And those who are in between have the time from Rosh Hashanah to 10 days later, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. They have that time to buff and polish their character and to buff and polish their connection with God, fellow Jews, humanity, etc. Those are the ones in between. So the idea that there is a book into which all the deeds are written is not a strange notion within a Jewish discussion, that there are books. God has the book of life, the book of death, the book of in-betweens. So he is playing on this imagery of books, and that whatever we have done, whatever we have said, everything in its minute detail, God has inscribed in your personal book. So let's see a little bit more of what he's trying to say. So he's saying that when you're conscious that there is someone watching you and hearing you, you are bound to behave more honorably. I think that's pretty straightforward. It would be like, you're in any kind of a setting, and if your boss is, they're watching you all the time, there's a certain way you're going to comport yourself. If you feel like nobody's watching, there may be a certain other way that you may comport yourself. But if you're conscious of the fact that up above there are no secrets, and that whatever you do, whatever you say, your deeds, your words, will leave a permanent impression somewhere in a book, that can make you wonder if what you're ready to do or say next is worthwhile. Because it's going to be recorded, like right? Like our session here today. This is recorded. And if it's, my wife will put it on YouTube and then send it around to everybody. Um, John Kennedy, in one of the Senate hearings, if I ever appear in front of him, he'll say, "Now, come on now, we have a record of you saying that, Rabbi." I'll say, "Where?" "Right here on YouTube." And let me quote that, right? You tell me if I quoted it correctly. So, yeah, that's what he's teaching. If you have a consciousness that above you, above us, there's an eye that sees, an ear that hears, and everything is recorded, that will make you sin less. Not sinless, but you're likely to sin a whole lot less. I read a study of a couple of psychologists that they devised an honor box for buying drinks from a machine. In other words, rather than putting the money in the machine, you put the money in an honor box, and that's how you paid for your drinks. And the sign included a picture of two eyes. And what they found was people paid more than twice as much for their drinks when they put up a sign with two eyes than when they replaced it with just a regular sign without the eyes. Interesting. So I could say the eyes have it, but I won't say that. That has quite an impact. I don't know how they thought to do this kind of an experiment, but that had the eyes, just the imagery, visualizing that there are eyes watching, was a motivator for people to not only just pay for the drink, but pay more than what the drink was worth. So all our deeds are recorded in a book. There's a divine system of bookkeeping. All of our achievements, all of our shortcomings. We believe in the Jewish tradition there is a very strict accounting. Now, an interesting question arises. When God does our personal accounting, is he looking at things we've already done? Or is he looking at things that were part of our potential for doing? And the reason I find that an interesting question is because one of the motivators of our using the shofar, the ram's horn, or other kinds of horns in the Jewish community, one of our motivators is the story of Abraham taking his son Isaac. According to the Muslims, he takes his son Yishmael. But according to the Jewish and other understandings, he takes his beloved son Isaac and brings him as a sacrifice. At the right moment, the angel of God comes in and says, "No, don't touch your son. God knows that you're sincere, etc., that you listen to him." And at that point, Abraham notices that there is a ram caught in the thickets. And That is why we use the ram's horn to get God's compassionate attention. Rather than kill his own son, God forbid, God has provided for some alternate way of Abraham showing his deep love for Hashem, not to kill his son, but to offer that ram as a sacrifice. Why do I mention this? Because when the angel is ready to stop Abraham from further taking the knife to his neck, he says to him, Avraham, Avraham, Abraham, Abraham. So many of the commentators say, why repeat his name? We repeat his name to get his attention. In other words, don't do it. Don't do Abraham. Phil, right? Don't do it. It's not what God wants. Thank you for doing everything he's requested, but show the world he doesn't want child sacrifices. He wants animal sacrifices. So he's saying Abraham, Abraham, repeated to catch his attention. Another commentary, whose name I don't have because I saw this commentary years ago, said something beautiful and very relevant to what we're looking at right now. He says the reason the angel says Abraham, Abraham, is to indicate to him that the Abraham that has played out in this particular episode is exactly the same Abraham that God had in mind for Abraham up in heaven. Namely, that when Abraham was created, he was created with a certain kind of a potential that is going to be actualized in this episode of bringing his son as a sacrifice. That potential will be actualized in this episode. So when the angel says Avraham, Avraham, it's an indication that the Avraham I have seen now, ready with the son, is exactly matching the Avraham that God created with that potential that has just now played out. There's a matching of the original intended Avraham and the Avraham that has played out in this episode. What's that got to do with anything? That's why I asked the question that when God does his judgment on Rosh Hashanah and other times during the year, he's certainly free to judge anybody and everybody at any time he wishes. Is he judging on what we've already done? Or is he judging on a potential that was there that hasn't yet been actualized? It's an interesting question. I don't have an answer to that question, but it's interesting to consider what is God judging during this period of judgment. So it's hard to know exactly what he's judging. Is he judging what we've actualized? Is he judging what we haven't yet actualized and we have yet to actualize? Not sure. Maybe the last thing we'll look at in the waning minutes of our time together. Another meaning is where he says, know what is above you. Know what is above you. The Hebrew, da ma lemala mimcha, can be translated as follows. Know that which comes from above is mimcha, is from you. In other words, whatever God decrees, you, the individual, have something to do with that. What does that mean? If things are going well in the world, in your community, in your family, etc., if things are going well, it is so because of what you and other people of your faith community have done. Your actions have moved God in a way that's appreciated by the people. However, if you are not making God happy with whatever you're doing, saying, etc., that also has a lot to do with how the world is running. So what does all that mean to say? It means to say exactly what Maimonides wrote in his Code of Jewish Law in the 1100s, early 1200s. Well, he died in 1204, so I don't know how much he wrote in those 4 years after the year 1200. What he says is, it's a very well-known teaching within the Jewish community, that whatever is the next thing you say or do You think it's just a personal, private thing. It's just me saying an insulting thing to somebody, or it's just me giving charity. I'm giving 3 coins in a charity box. What does it mean? It means I've given 3 coins. Yay, wow. No, Maimonides says that everything that we do, and tell me if this is how you understand it within your faith tradition, everything we do or say has cosmic consequences. In other words, he's saying there's nothing private and personal about anything we do or say, even if we're just in our own little room doing whatever we're doing. Everything has cosmic consequences to the extent, says Maimonides, that if imagine before you do or say anything, imagine the world being exactly balanced, meaning that the entire world should have mercy. On the other hand, God is also a God of judgment and retribution. Imagine the world with the scale being exactly in the middle, half deserving and half deserving not good. Half deserving good, half deserving, and the scales are right in the middle. And whatever you do or say next is going to tip the scale of the universe, tip the scale of the universe to either being going towards the positive and the good, or tipping it going towards the negative and the not so good. So he takes this teaching of cosmic consequence, really, really far. That whatever we do or say next tips the world one way or the other. And that tips God's actions one way or the other, even if we're just sitting private in a room, nobody's around. That's the cosmic consequence of everything that we do. So that's pretty weighty. That's a weighty, heavy teaching. And I think that's probably what makes it last so long. These things were written 1,800 years ago. If they were pithy little statements that are like bumper stickers, and you were just meant to look at them like once in every 4 years and say, "Oh, that's cute," or find them on Facebook, okay, the value would be limited. But apparently, enough people found these teachings to be so heavy, as if to say worth our time and investment in understanding them and maybe even affecting our behavior, because they're so weighty and so divine. I don't mean divine like beautiful, lovely, wonderful all the time, but coming from a divine source. God gave the Torah to Moses, Moses to Joshua, Joshua to the elder. All of this starts with a divine spark. And that's what makes it worth considering and studying and delving into the depths of it. So I think we finished teaching number 1. Next time we'll look at teaching number 2. Before we end and before I press the button to end, any last minute thoughts, reactions, comments? Yeah,
Question, Rabbi.
sure.
So you said the book of life, but when I read I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly, the book of Shari Teshuvah, I think it's the
Okay.
Art Scroll makes it.
Okay.
They
The
reference it as
the
the
gates
book
of repentance? Is that the
Yes,
gates?
sir. Yes, sir.
Gates of
Okay,
repentance.
yeah.
Okay.
They reference it to the book of remembrance in there. Is that correct?
Sometimes people make an equation between the two. The book of remembrance is another way of saying God not only remembers, which wouldn't surprise us, God also records as a way of remembrance, records all of our deeds.
Okay. And my other question was the term rabbi versus like Rav, or like Rav Cook, or like the Rebbe.
Yeah.
Can you possibly explain, like, in the aspect of Judaism? That was my question. Is there a difference between those two terms? That would be my question.
I don't know exactly what the difference is, and I don't know that there are crisp differences. Um, Somebody who's a great scholar in like a very orthodox community is not likely to be called rabbi this or that, because anybody who gets their rabbinical degree would be called rabbi. They may kick up the honorific of that title by calling him Rav this or that.
The
Um,
Rav is a higher standard, is what you're saying.
I don't know if it's a higher standard. It's more. It seems to be more applicable to the more venerated authority. The more
Okay.
venerated authority. The term Rav, the Rav. If I were to use the term the Rav in America, it would refer generally to Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, who passed away 32 years ago, who I mentioned a few sessions ago. He was during his lifetime the leader of the modern Orthodox community in America and throughout the world. I pointed to his 20, 25 some odd books on my shelf. In Israel, the Rav is Rabbi Cook, Rabbi Isaac, Abraham Isaac HaKohen Cook. So it's the same, the Rav, but it refers to generally two different people in America and Israel. Then you have the title Rebbe, like the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher, the Chabad Rebbe. Um, and anybody in Chabad or Hasidic circles may be referred to as the Rebbe. At the same time, I went to Yeshiva University, where the president of Yeshiva University, that's up in the Bronx, 8,000 students today, the president of it, Rabbi Berman, not Rav Berman or Rebbe Berman, but he is called Rabbi Berman, gave the opening prayer either yesterday or today in the Senate, which was a lovely prayer. Anybody who taught me Talmud at Yeshiva University, I would say, oh yeah, he was my Rebbe. He doesn't have to be Chabad or Lubavitch or anybody in that category. Doesn't have to be Hasidic, but that's another way of using the term my Rebbe, my teacher. And there's probably other titles that I'm not familiar with, but I don't know that anybody can really give you a crisp. Why do you call him Rebbe and not Rabbi? Why do you call him Rav and not Rabbi? Why do you call him Rabbi? So I don't know if there are any fine lines of demarcation.
So along that explanation that you just gave, we see in Pirke Avot here like Rabban
Yes,
Gamliel.
Rabban.
So Rabban being different than Rabbi.
Good. Rabban almost means not just my rabbi, but our.
Hmm.
Rabban would indicate a
For the
wider
whole.
circle of
Okay.
adherents. Our rabbi. And then there is a title that is formed by the first letters of several Hebrew words right after the other. And it's pronounced as a Rash Kebahag. Nobody uses it. Generally, very few. Rash Kebahag are the first letters of a series of Hebrew words. That means he is the rabbi of everybody in the world, all the Jewish people in the world, all the entire Jewish population. He is the rabbi of them. And that has an expression in the Hebrew term Gadol Hador. Gadol means the great one, Hador meaning the generation. This person was the great one of the generation. And many different groups or sects of Jews might refer to their rabbi as the rabbi of the generation. And that's okay. That's okay. There
Is
was a
that when
rabbi.
we hear that there's a Mashiach or there's a Rebbe for each rabbi for each generation? Would that be similar or no?
Yeah, well, for example, there's a very strongly held Jewish tradition that in each generation, the messianic figure, as the Jewish people understand it, either has appeared, will appear, is already there, waiting to be revealed. And if we don't have those three things, that know that there's an ear that hears, an eye, and all our books are written. If we're not conscious of that, that Messiah will not be revealed in that generation. In other
Amen.
words, the generation is pregnant to have it revealed, but we may not have been worthy enough for various reasons, and therefore it came, but it went. The moment came and it went, and we have to wait for the next opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Robert, you want to say something?
Yes, a threefold question. What's the
Threefold.
difference? Yes,
Okay,
I'll be brief.
sure.
The difference between a mitzvah and a mitzvot. In my
Mitzvot is
reading, I
plural.
see that.
Mitzvah, yeah, it's good. You did good. Mitzvot are plural of mitzvah. Mitzvah is one. Mitzvot are more than one.
Okay. And
So I'm
what
now I'm
does,
doing I may be doing a mitzvah teaching
okay,
teaching you the wisdom of Pirke Avot, the universal wisdom of this Pirke Avot. That's one mitzvah. Later, I may do more mitzvot. I may do keep other commandments. So it's just the plural of mitzvah.
the plural. Okay, the other two sides. What does a Mishnah means, and what does a Midrash mean? The
Wow.
definition of that.
Okay. While I sit on one foot.
Oh, okay.
Uh, Mishnah really is a way of demarcating the laws of the oral law.
Okay.
So there's a written law that we call the five books of Moses. There's an oral law that was communicated to Moses also at Mount Sinai, Exodus chapter 20. And that oral law elucidates various aspects of the written law. But there is a set of Mishnah that I'm looking at here on my bookshelf, and each law of the Mishnah, each law is called a Mishnah. Chapter 1, Mishnah 2, chapter 83, Mishnah 5.
Okay.
Midrash is background story, but story sounds like it could be a fairy tale. It's not a story in that sense. It's a background episode to things that happen in the Torah, in the five books of Moses. So Moses confronts Mount Sinai. He's there standing in front of Mount Sinai before God shows him the burning bush, etc. The Midrash would teach us how did Moses get there? So the Midrash teaches, well, he was a shepherd to Yitro, his father-in-law, and the Midrash says that while he was out there with the sheep, one of them went away from the flock, and he followed it, and that sheep went and started to lick up water from the flowing river with great enthusiasm. And the Midrash has Moses saying to this sheep, had I known how thirsty you were, I would have carried you here myself. And that's where the Midrash says God looked down upon that. And God said, if this man can be so merciful and kind to one sheep that left the fold, he is the right one to take my people out of Egypt. So that's an example of a midrash. How did that
Yes.
get there? You're watching a Broadway show. You'd be interested. How did that piano get there? How did the costume get there? How did this? How did the ladder? Where did the ladder come from? It's like having a backstage view of a Broadway show that shows you how everything got to where it needed to go. Is that
Good? Oh, yes, definitely.
okay?
I'll do my research and continue on. That's very good.
Well,
Thank
you
you.
had a third one. You had a third one?
Yes, it was about the Tanakh, which I'm aware of just a little. And within the Tanakh, the is very interesting to me, but I'm learning more and more. So
Okay.
I just want you to know I'm very appreciative.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
the Tanakh is rich, rich, rich in all kinds of stuff. The five books is Moses more about law than the rest of the Hebrew Bible. But oh my gosh, I'm studying with somebody the book of Isaiah now.
Mhm.
We've just gone through 10 chapters after like a year and a half. I mean, we're slow and deliberate, etc. Anyway, hey, okay, listen, this is one of my favorite parts of my week. When I see everybody and we have a great conversation and questions, reactions, and comments, it really is fabulous. So I appreciate it. I will tell you that God willing, next Wednesday I'll be available. The following Wednesday is the second day of Rosh Hashanah. So I won't be available. And that reminds me to send you a schedule during these holidays, the upcoming holidays. The Jewish calendar is rich with all kinds of holidays. I will let you know beforehand a schedule of when I'm able and due to various holidays when I'm not able. And then after those holidays, we pretty much coast pretty clear for several months, if that's where we want to go. Yeah, John, you wanted to say something before I go?
Yeah, one other quick comment I was going to make is in the lesson when it talks about know what is from above you, It
Yeah.
reminds me, there was a synagogue here locally that we had visited, and on the wall, of course in Hebrew, but in English it says, "Know whom before you stand." And
Yes.
so very similar, to that phrasing there. But I always love that as a good example of the reverence and the respect and knowing who is above you is kind of the message there. So
Beautiful. So we're going to look at that lesson in an upcoming Mishnah of the second chapter. And it could well be the next one, if I'm not mistaken. Where it says may not be exactly the next one, but yeah, it says know before whom you stand. And in many synagogues, I'll end with this, in many synagogues, right above the Holy Ark,
right.
usually there's some wording in Hebrew or sometimes in English to help people focus on like a central facet of Jewish teaching while they're looking at the Holy Ark with the Torah scrolls in it. Very often that phrase in Hebrew, da lifnei mi ata omed, know before whom you stand, is the phrase right above the ark. So when people face the ark, as we always do, and we see the Torah scrolls, we see that message, and that's an overarching message found quite often in many synagogues. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Anyway, have a wonderful rest of the day. Be happy, healthy, and safe. And today's 9/11. Yesterday was a terrible tragedy with Charlie Kirk. Let's pray for better days and better news and only good tidings, God willing. So
Thank
be
you.
well, everybody, to you and your families. Take care, and we'll see you, God willing, next Wednesday. All righty. Bye-bye
Shalom,
now.
everyone.
Shalom,
Right.
everybody.